Hey movie buffs, I hope you're having a good day. So where was there to go in a fourth Alien movie after protagonist Ripley had launched herself into flames at the end of Alien 3? Well, never underestimate the power of the industry to dig up a franchise that appears to be dead and gone. Halloween Resurrection, anyone? And to be fair, Halloween Resurrection's explanation for coming back was actually more believable than the original idea for Alien 4, which was, and I'm not joking, to claim the events of Alien 3 were simply a nightmare experienced by Ripley.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest, Alien 3 was a bit of a bloody nightmare, but having that be the explanation is probably just as bad as Alien 3 itself, disrespecting the end of Aliens. You're just doing the same thing again. The good old what we just saw doesn't matter. 20th Century Fox thankfully came around to scrapping the dream idea and approached Joss Whedon to write a script for Alien 4. Whedon was very keen to bring the alien to Earth, with his early ideas culminating in a final battle between aliens and humans. David Ryder and Walter Hill of Brandywine Entertainment, who had been involved in the franchise from the beginning, suggested the idea of cloning. The studio surprisingly decided to work with the cards they were dealt and initially accepted that Ripley would not be in the film, with the idea being that the fourth alien would centre around an adult clone of the character of Newt from Aliens. Sadly, this creative and interesting idea didn't last long, as the studio didn't want to take a risk not including Sigourney Weaver, and their intention quickly became to change the clone character from Newt to Ripley. Sigourney Weaver was reluctant to return as Ripley, believing the character had been liberated in Alien 3, and she did not want Alien to just continually be Ripley wakes up somewhere new with aliens running around. However, Weaver was more open to the clone idea, as she thought it would give her more dimensions to explore with the Ripley character now that she would be a new version. Weaver agreed to come back with a co-producer's credit, and she was paid the equivalent of the production budget of the first Alien, taking home $11 million. Well played, Sigourney, well played.
They can bill me.
Searching for a new director, the studio approached Danny Boyle, who directed Trainspotting and 28 Days Later. Boyle was interested in the project for a short time, but dropped out because he didn't want to take on a sequel. Peter Jackson felt the same. He was approached, but he could not get excited about a new Alien film. Names like David Cronenberg and Paul W.S. Anderson, who went on to direct Alien vs Predator, were also considered. However, the gig ultimately went to French director Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who had made a couple of provocative and interesting sci-fi films in Delicatessen and The City of the Lost Children, and Jeunet accepted the offer but required an interpreter throughout, as he did not speak much English when he took on the film. Jeunet actively went about trying to bring on board people who could help replicate a lot of his visual beats from his previous movies, and he hired special effects supervisor Jean-Christophe Comar and cinematographer Darius Kunji, both he had worked with on City of the Lost Children. Nigel Phelps was selected for production designer, having been the brains behind the look of Gotham City in the iconic Batman 1989, as well as Mega City 1 in the less well received 1995 Judge Dredd film.
I never broke the law! I am the law!
For the design of the aliens, Jeunet was keen to bring back H.R. Giger, who designed the alien in the original classic. However, the team that worked on Alien 3, Amalgamated Dynamics, ended up being asked to return for Alien Resurrection. The group based their designs closely on what the aliens would get up to in the movie, with new elements such as swimming introduced, so the aliens were given pointed tails to assist this. They also modified them to have more pointed heads and chins, hoping to make them appear more vicious and in your face. Jeunet decided to use CGI aliens whenever the creature's legs were in frame, and Blue Sky Studios were hired to create these effects. This film also saw the introduction of a human-alien hybrid creature, and the crew were very excited by this, as it gave them a chance to construct something that was entirely new to the series. An early idea was to reproduce Sigourney Weaver's features, although the crew felt this approach would have been too similar to the design of the character Syl in 1995's cult sci-fi movie Species. However, eyes and nose were added to the new hybrid to allow it to communicate more emotion than the xenomorphs we knew, and the intention was to give the hybrid more depth and intrigue, as opposed to just being a soulless killing machine. But Jeunet ended up taking this a bit too far, as he desired to give the hybrid genitalia that was a mix of male and female. 20th Century Fox were uncomfortable with this, and Jeunet eventually changed his mind. Yeah, there's giving the creature more emotion, and then there's giving it a bit too much of a human touch, if you know what I mean. The genitalia are actually added though, with Jeunet removing them during post-production. So yeah, throughout the film's production, the animatronic did indeed have male and female genitalia mix. That is mental. The studio also wanted to cut the scene which is pretty much a love scene between Ripley and the hybrid, but they decided to keep it only after Sigourney Weaver told them she would not promote the film if the scene was cut. Why is everyone involved in the Alien series a bit of a weirdo?
Must be a chick thing.
The hybrid animatronic ended up requiring 9 puppeteers and was far more complex than the other alien models in the film. The spaceships in Alien Resurrection were miniatures, with the visual effects supervisors resisting the use of CGI and believing models were much more realistic for ships. Yeah, tell that to today's filmmakers please. Jeunet rejected the original design for the USM Auriga, stating it was too vertical for the opening shot and that it reminded him too much of a space station. The crew ended up coming out with another design, which was more streamlined and acceptably horizontal. When casting the movie, Jeunet selected some pretty capable actors and actresses, such as Winona Ryder as Annalee Call, who is secretly a synthetic life form and has a troubled relationship with Ripley in the movie. Ryder admitted this is one of the roles she said yes to fastest, since she wanted to brag to her brothers that she was in an alien film. She goes on to be one of the best characters in the movie, and Ryder, who's a great actress anyway, does her best with some inconsistent material that's now and again good and now and again goes nowhere. Ron Perlman plays Ron Jonah, a mercenary with a short temper who is probably a better version of the characters in Alien 3. He's a completely horrible lunatic, but he's actually pretty entertaining in his delivery.
Earth, man. What a shithole.
Brad Dourif was a significant casting choice for the movie, as Dr. Jonathan Jediman, one of the scientists who has cloned Ripley and is studying the aliens. Dourif completely gets lost in this performance, and he really understands the bizarre vibe Alien Resurrection is going for. Dominique Pinon was cast as Dom Vries, the Betty's mechanic who is wheelchair bound. Vries relates to Cole throughout the film and has a standoff slaying match all the way through with Ron, which is pretty entertaining. And as a character he's quite unique, and it's refreshing to see a disabled character actually being allowed to be badass and an important part of the film. Alien Resurrection was filmed at Fox Studios in Los Angeles, California from October 1996 to February 1997. The studio didn't pick the best time to film, as studio space was difficult to come by due to filming taking place at the same time for blockbusters such as Titanic, Starship Troopers and The Lost World Jurassic Park. Darn that James Cameron, taking up so much space with Titanic. Could you have brought it down a peg? However, it was Sigourney Weaver herself who decided to film the movie outside of England for the first time, believing the schedules in the previous entries had exhausted the crew. A big focus for Jeunet was portraying the new Ripley clone as skillful and unpredictable, so a scene was filmed in which Ripley throws a basketball through a hoop while facing the opposite direction. Weaver trained for 10 days, and Jeunet at one point considered using a machine to throw the ball, or even to CGI it. Weaver refused and was determined to genuinely make the shot. The scene required dozens of takes, with Weaver failing countless times. The crew were on the verge of giving up, but on her last shot, Weaver was successful and caused Ron Perlman to break character as he turned to the camera to exclaim his shock. There was enough of a pause between the successful dunk and Perlman's reaction for the film's editors to cut the scene accordingly during post-production. Weaver was delighted with the shot and has gone on to call it one of the proudest moments of her career. For the first time in the series, an underwater scene was shot, with the entirety of Stage 16 at Fox Studios reconstructed into a huge tank that contained 548,000 gallons of water. The actors were subjected to about 15 underwater training sessions in swimming pools around the Los Angeles area before arriving at the underwater set, where they underwent a further 2 weeks of training before anything was shot. Actress Winona Ryder struggled early on with the scene, as she had nearly drowned at the age of 12 and had not stepped foot in water since. She asked to use a body double, but ultimately realised it would have been too obvious to audiences. Admirably, Ryder filmed the scene, but suffered from severe anxiety. In order to heighten contrast, the cinematographer used an electric blue tint for the underwater sequence. He also added silver to the printing process. Throughout the movie, this had the result of making the dark colours richer and giving everything a metallic tinge. Alien Resurrection opened early in France on November 12, 1997, earning over 6 million and climbing its way to the top of the French box office. The film made its way to the United States and Canada on November 26 and debuted at number 2 at the box office, behind the Robin Williams Disney project, Flubber. The film went on to gross 47.8 million in the US and Canada, and was sadly the least successful Alien movie in that market. However, much like Alien 3, it was better received internationally, netting a worldwide gross of 161.4 million on a budget of 70 million. The film encountered a mixed reaction from critics, with an early good review coming from Entertainment Weekly, who awarded the sequel a B+, stating it was way ahead of the previous film and developed the story cleverly, ultimately resulting in a fresh and thoughtful take. Washington Post critic Desson Thompson was also positive, writing that the movie does recycle things, but it has a great deal of fun as it does so. Rolling Stone critic Peter Travers was positive too, saying the film may be slightly repetitive, but it is worthy of its predecessors due to the heroines of the film, Sigourney Weaver and Winona Ryder. However, there were also some pretty negative responses, with Janet Maslin of the New York Times calling the film murky, and beloved film critic Roger Ebert describing the film as not containing one single shot that would fill anyone with wonder, and he named it one of the worst films of 1997. Much like its predecessor Alien 3, Alien Resurrection is a difficult film for me to really sum up my feelings on. It certainly feels like more of a popcorn film than Alien 3, and it's a lot more exciting, but I do actually miss the contemplative dark themes of the previous movie, and obviously the perfect combination of horror and action of the film before that. While the movie introduces a lot of new bold ideas, they're not especially fleshed out, they're just kind of dropped in front of you, and you're asked to care. For example, Ripley's new life as a clone could have been way more interesting than it is. Don't get me wrong, Sigourney Weaver does pretty well with this mysterious performance, and she has far more of an edge now, but I thought the movie would take advantage of the whole what makes someone human idea. Can a clone still be the person they're made from? How do Ripley's memories affect her now? And would she go on a journey to regain the essence of the true Ellen Ripley? None of this is discussed. There is a little bit about who the Ripley clone will now be loyal to since she is a hybrid. There's kind of an intrigue there, but for me that's far less interesting than if this clone was trying to make sense of things and recapture her lost humanity. We all know Ripley isn't going to end up being on the side of the aliens. A far more fruitful idea would be, as I said, seeing if she can become Ripley again, grappling with what she does and doesn't remember. This is a big sci-fi theme in plenty of movies, and it would have been right at home in an Alien film. But instead they just make Ripley a bit weird and a bit more aggressive, and that's kind of it for the character development. The Ripley clone idea could have worked despite it being silly on paper, but for me it just sets up a lot of missed potential, despite Sigourney Weaver's committed performance.
And in a few hours, it's gonna burst its way through your rib cage, and you're gonna die. Any questions?
Seeing her kick the arse of people on the ship, and then of course the basketball scene, these moments are pretty fun to watch, but they don't get me especially interested. They're just cool scenes and they're fine, but the character I loved is entirely gone, so I'm not really invested anymore, despite some fun moments. This is probably the most blatant time in the series that Ripley is supposed to simply be a black and white action hero, and it's nice to see her with a sense of reckless abandon. But sadly I find myself missing the old Ripley. I miss her humanity, her bravery, her warmth, her conviction, and to see her reduced down to just, yeah, she's badass, is quite a shame to me if I'm being honest. While it's not a film full of great character interactions, in my view a lot of them are pointless, the relationship that develops between Ripley and Cole is pretty interesting to watch despite it never really reaching its potential. Sigourney Weaver and Winona Ryder needed a few more scenes and some slightly better writing to really get this relationship off the ground. Although I did enjoy what they were hinting at here, which is a connection that starts off as resentment but ends up as mutual respect. Ripley has lost everything she has ever known, and Cole has been programmed to feel emotions like a human. So Ripley's loss and Cole's supposed gain help them to connect on a deeper level. This was the chance for Ripley to have a new daughter figure, and this time it would be an android, and we all know Ripley's history with them. And this was an android who was also lost, but for completely different reasons to Ripley. This could have produced so many thought-provoking exchanges and moments. The material was all there to make a serious science fiction film. This relationship could have been quintessentially sci-fi, but at the same time an entirely different interaction to anything we had seen in the series. The actors were just begging to be given the material. Winona Ryder is such a highlight, and she stands tall alongside Sigourney Weaver with her performance. But instead the film's just dedicated to being weird. Instead of actually exploring any of the themes it gives you, the movie just tries to be strange. There's suddenly more of a focus on body horror and disgusting imagery, and that becomes the direction of the film and takes precedence over the character interactions. And when I say weird, I think one of the many scenes that is the perfect depiction of that word is this one. It's Brad Dourif's Doctor making out with a glass that holds the alien queen. This is bananas. This moment is jarring and odd, but strangely haunting and entertaining at the same time. There's not many actors who could have pulled this off, with Brad Dourif being one of the only ones. He's so committed to the strange nature of the scene and the performance overall, and because of his earnest efforts, the scene becomes memorable. So yeah, this movie contains Chucky trying to kiss an alien. There's a crossover you never thought you'd see.
No fucking way!
Dourif is amazing in this film. You believe him to be a real messed up person who is so blinded by discovery that his morals and his sanity are slowly disappearing. It's written all over his face how dangerous this doctor has become because of his work. His sick expressions and his obsessive compulsive speeches are really convincing and have your skin crawling almost as much as the aliens themselves. That's how disturbing this character is. Dourif is also the perfect actor for the body horror that Alien Resurrection is going for. Again, not many actors could pull off being shown with their body pulled apart whilst delivering lines that could be laughable but come across as quite horrific when Dourif is delivering them in this surreal situation. The film gives Hellraiser a run for its money with some of its body horror, I must say. We could have used more scenes like this, as Ripley is reduced to tears and her humanity comes through. It's actually one of the best performances of Weaver in a single scene in the series. I really felt her horror and the despair, and if we had scenes elsewhere where she grappled with regaining her humanity, moments like this would mean even more. Ripley being forced to wipe the room out with a flamethrower is so tragic to watch, and the horror of how things have turned out really hits you hard in this scene. It's a real heartbreaking moment to see the fall of humanity, how blinded we can get in the face of discovery that we end up becoming just as evil as anything that has ever existed in the name of this so-called greater good. The action and chase scenes in Resurrection are honestly a big improvement on Alien 3. Don't get me wrong, it's no aliens, but it's a great example of a 90s action film done right. It nails all those 90s beats with a focus on exhilaration, pace, and not much to think about, but having fun watching the screen. The underwater scene stands out specifically and was something we had not seen before in the franchise. It's incredibly well done. The lighting is fantastic, the hue of the water creates an eerie atmosphere, and the use of shadows and reflections adds to the tension and gives a new dimension to an alien chase. The camera angles are also great, with shots from above and below the water adding to the disorienting and suffocating feeling of this scene. I love Ripley's face where she witnesses one of the crew meet their demise underwater. It's a haunting moment and one of the finest examples of Sigourney Weaver doing her best with the material. I don't really care about the whole loyalty angle, as I said, but at least Weaver makes it entertaining to watch here. You can't tell if she is sad about the death or if she is actually showing the alien respect and fascination. This is one of the most expertly crafted chase scenes in the whole franchise because the jeopardy is so creative. They are being pursued by an alien swimming away for their life, and when they get their head above water, they discover they are in the middle of the egg nest. Out of the frying pan into the fire. Or in this case, not just the fire, out of the frying pan into the bloody furnace. It's genuinely one of the most thrilling moments in the franchise because you're not expecting it. And when the chest huggers start jumping at them above the surface while an alien is after them below, you're on the edge of your seat. It's one of the most urgent and nerve-wracking sequences in the whole Alien series. That's one of the biggest strengths of this imperfect film. The action is pretty much first class and quite creative in a fun 90s style. The newborn may be a creative idea, but I genuinely hate the look of the character. I'm glad they didn't use CGI, but I think it just looks goofy. It's just a really bad design. I just laugh whenever this big lummox is on screen. If you're going to take the focus off the iconic aliens in favour of a new hybrid, it better look good. But let's be honest, this creature looks a bit pathetic, and I can't really take it serious. Especially when Brad Dourif starts referring to it as an adorable little baby when it meets Ripley. While I love Brad Dourif, this is where I think his character, as well as the film, jumps the shark and crosses over from being enjoyably strange to just pure cringe.
Oh, look. Look, beautiful, beautiful little baby. Look, it thinks you're its mother.
You would think the eyes and the mouth might elicit sympathy from the viewer, and I suppose that's the idea behind it. For once in the series, we're supposed to actually empathise with the alien. For me, the absurdity and nonsense of the situation and the very strong thought in my head of how far the Alien series has fallen, that we are now seeing Ripley basically make out with an alien, yeah, I just couldn't get invested. That moment where Ripley does, yes, basically make out with a newborn is nutty. It's nonsense. It's where Alien Resurrection completely falls apart. Sigourney Weaver insisted this scene be included. And you know what? You could have had me on board, Sigourney. With a sympathetic alien, I could have got on board. But you making out with it as well? No, love. I can't cope with that. That's bonkers. I honestly would rather this alien did look like Ripley in the style of Species, at least it would have been memorable. Or maybe if Ripley had a standoff with the iconic alien that we know, but the alien ends up maybe having second thoughts about killing Ripley because of their connection. That could have been cool because it would have kind of looked badass to have Ripley come face to face with the horror that has haunted her, but is now looking at her as an equal and someone to respect. Ripley could then show her true allegiance and finally defeat the alien, this time both mentally as well as physically, wiping out the alien and removing any possible chance of there being a relationship between us and these monsters. So the whole thing would end in a huge liberation for humanity, finally overcoming this evil predator in such a triumphant way. But no, we get this big lump being treated like some kind of incest love child. It's just wrong. And you can't tell me, well, the whole idea is Ripley's the mother, so that's what they're going for. That theme wasn't explored. You can't just say that and pretend you're paying it off. All the way through, the most discussion we ever got about Ripley being the mother is, we're told Ripley's the mother, and it's like, okay, we're going to talk about it more, we're going to examine it, we're going to explore the theme. No, we're just going to have Ripley make out with it while Brad Dourif's disconnected body says "Coogee Coogee Coo" from the sidelines. Madness. So does the special edition of Alien Resurrection improve any of this? That was, of course, included when the film was released on DVD and Blu-ray. The special edition of Resurrection is a lot shorter than the one for Alien 3, and the changes are pretty mild. However, they do improve the film, for my money. There's an added moment of dialogue between Call and Ripley, which I was of course begging for, and there is a mention of Newt, and it's pretty emotional as Ripley says she no longer remembers her name.
There was this girl. She had bad dreams. I tried to help her. She died. Now I can't even remember her name.
This was great, and I think mentioning Newt is very respectful, and to keep on deleting her any chance they could get was frustrating, as the director said the theatrical was his ideal version of the film, so he didn't want this in there either. I genuinely don't know why the series seemed to want to eliminate the poignant relationship between Ripley and Newt, which was one of the best things in the whole series, and one of the elements that kept things grounded and special. Ripley makes the statement that she still has nightmares about the xenomorph, but waking up is now a lot worse. This was a great line and quite smart. Again, no need, but this movie seems determined to delete anything that's thoughtful in favour of just mindless action. The ending is also different in the special edition, and that's a lot better too. The closing moments in the theatrical cut are pretty empty, to be honest, and the film ends quite abruptly with the characters reaching Earth, and we don't get to see what Earth has become. In the special edition, there's quite a beautiful looking scene which is classic sci-fi, where Ripley and Call find themselves on a desolate Earth, not knowing where to go and what to do. It's an interesting idea that in the whole time Ripley was fighting the aliens and trying to save humans, humans were destroying the Earth in the process. Ripley is no longer able to call Earth her home, and as the camera rises and we look out over what's left of the planet, she is no longer tied down by the people and trying to protect them. So in a way she's free, but once again, everything she fought for, she's realised perhaps wasn't worth it. So bleak, isn't it? It's a shame that the series I always thought had a bit of optimism underneath the surface, especially in Aliens, basically has continually stripped it away on purpose. But at least the way it does strip it away is through delivering tragic sci-fi ideas of what it means to be human, what is good and is it worth it, will humans ultimately destroy themselves. So I enjoy watching it, but again I just miss what Alien used to be. Ultimately, Alien Resurrection looks great. I love the metallic tone of the film and the visuals are pretty striking, there's lots of jarring imagery, the body horror effects are great, the action scenes are entertaining. But for me, quite simply put, the decisions and the ideas that didn't really pay off and at times were not even good anyway, are what bring the film down. The dialogue's also a bit clunky, there's a few great lines here and there, but ultimately I don't like hearing these characters talk. And of course, by the end of the movie, you're sat there with your head in your hands when you see the newborn, asking how did this happen? How did Alien fall this far? So is it better than Alien 3? In some respects, yes. It's a much better action movie, and in some moments it's way more entertaining. But for me, despite not being a huge fan of Alien 3, I do find the film fascinating and I admire its ambition, and Alien 3 at least actually commits to its ideas. So in that respect, I find Alien 3 perhaps a more interesting movie than Resurrection. Resurrection isn't a terrible film, but sadly at this point in the series, the essence of what made Alien great was gone. So it suffers from real franchise fatigue. It doesn't feel the same anymore. And the fact there's actually a little bit of enjoyment to be had is honestly quite an achievement. So I think it was wise to stop here while there was still a little bit of dignity and respect left in the franchise. Until Ridley Scott got back hold of it, of course, but that's another story. And so movie buffs, it's over to you. What do you think of Alien Resurrection? Do you think it's better than Alien 3? Where do you rank it in the Alien franchise? What do you think of what I said in this video? And what are your thoughts on the film all these years later? Thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing to this channel if you love retrospectives and analysis. I will see you guys next time.